Welcome to 1963. It's the 5th of January, exactly 60 years ago. This is Beatles60. We ain't jumping around.
We ain't jumping around. Good news! The Fab Four are done with Hamburg residencies for good.
Our boys left Hamburg behind on New Year's Day some days ago. Astrid volunteered to drive the four to the airport. Their flight was delayed by a winter storm, the severity of which nobody saw coming. Well, listeners who caught our past 2 episodes know all about the extremely unusual weather that's to come.
It's about to become a freakish winter in northwestern Europe, especially across the UK, for 3 months.
They don't know it now, but it's about to come right when they return to England. Oh, maybe they do know it now.
They probably know it.
What day is it? We're dropping this on Thursday. What is that?
The 5th?
Well, it's the 5th, so they now they know it.
Yeah.
They just returned to the Arctic England.
That's right.
These last nights at the Star Club, parts of which we've all heard the audio from, are kind of the Beatles' last performances as just a club band, John would later say.
Back in the UK, one single has been out, and a second one is a couple of weeks away.
And yet, they're still unsure whether chart successes are about to come. Anyway, a new era lay ahead. They knew that much.
A new year and tours on the horizon.
Looking ahead, even now, they know that they'll gradually start playing nationwide for the first time, but not always topping the bill. Most everyone in the UK who's listened to the radio had by this time probably heard Love Me Do, which is still hanging on in the singles charts, but will gradually start descending. Still, the group kind of remains a regional act, still unknown to most Britons outside the teen demographic in the northwest counties of England. We, the people of the future, know what's about to happen. But nobody at the very start of 1963 had any idea of the mania that's about to start building nationwide in the UK over the following months. Not even the Beatles, nobody.
By the way, you wonderful listeners, we're going to jump around a little bit today.
Kind of like the past 2 episodes, we're jumping around to orient ourselves, and you, dearest listener, to the 2 narrative arcs we're in the middle of. Between the narrative arc of the Beatles era that's ending and the new one just begun. By looking back a couple of years from 1960, witnessing 1962 as a transitional period, and then looking ahead at 1963 in awe of where they're really going.
Yeah, we spent the last couple or few years talking about all of the things that were leading up to this moment. It really is awesome. So in this episode, we're going to offer a wider perspective on the timeline from the Indra to Ed, the first residency in Hamburg in 1960, all the way up to Brian Epstein's negotiations with Ed Sullivan at the end of 1963.
Oh, I thought you meant Mr. Ed. Okay, Ed Sullivan, right.
Wilbur.
Wilbur. All the Beatles are here.
Yeah.
Really big shoe. We normally cover a month at a time, sometimes jumping back or forward a month or 2 to review or preview. Today, our review and preview will span the first 3.5 years of the Beatles, spelled with an A, essentially the entire time before conquering America.
But we like to say that we aren't jumping around. Like this.
Okay, you want your mind blown? The interval between this podcast episode and our next episode 60 years ago will have been the exact same interval, same amount of time.
The Beatles would have experienced the exact same number of hours. Same season, man.
Northern Hemisphere, though.
All you gotta do, man, all of you who've been following this timeline with us already get the pace, man.
You already understand, right? I mean, same daily pace. Technically, we'd call it a longitudinal phenomenological historiographic study.
Hey, Larry! What's with all the mumbo jumbo?
Well, this is serious. Quite a serious series. Time moves at one pace and in one direction. This is apparently so. At least in lived experience. Einstein may have disagreed, but...
I mean, heck. Maybe time is round and space is curved. But screw Einstein. Ultimately, we're talking about human experience. Linear time. We trace the sequence of events. It's amazing how much we're able to make clear sense of the Fab Four's development.
It is a pace, you know, for getting it. Hence our wonderful slogan. Come on, let's say it together. Beatles60, we ain't jumping around.
Hi, Ariana Grande here. And I wanted to say I love the Beatles60 Podcast because, following the Beatles60 Podcast, each episode gives you a look into our worlds. Groovers, listen. The interwebs are full of empty infotainment and the same old about Beatles trivia. You deserve the real story. And what a trip! Go deeper with the Beatles60 Podcast. The story from here just gets more amazing. Peace and love. I'm out. Ariana Grande. How do you say it? I can't put Ariana Grande. Sounds like I'm getting myself a cup of coffee or something. Ariana Grande. I'll take an Can I get an Ariana Grande? No cream. Hold the sugar. Peace and love. Peace and love.
Yeah. We've been breaking our own norm for a few overview episodes. And this is the last of 3. Next episode, we'll be back to the monthly preview you'd normally expect. It's all going to be about February 1963. But this episode, woohoo!
Yeah, fab.
A little funky, you know.
Twisted and shouting.
Man, for so long, it seemed like we'd never reach this day.
But it is here now.
We've arrived, and to prove it, we're here.
Number one.
I have always thought in the back of my mind.
Spoilers!
They still have no idea how far beyond the toppermost they're about to go.
Ripping the planet a new poppermost.
Whew.
Twisted.
I say, where are we going, fellas? And they go, to the top, Johnny. And I say, where's that, fellas? And they say, to the toppermost of the toppermost. Right.
So what's next?
Cheer up.
So it's time for Where We Going, Fellas. This is where we take stock of what was probably on their minds exactly 60 years ago. For the moment, let's not jump around. It's the very start of 1963, back in Britain after 2 weeks at the Star Club. Andy, let's take their temperature in January 63.
Well, I think they were extremely excited to be leaving Hamburg, knowing that they wouldn't have to do another residency there. That's pretty clear. Love Me Do had hit the top 20, and they were going to be releasing the Please Please Me single and recording a full-length album, which will also be called Please Please Me, of course. Their unique collaboration with George Martin and Parlophone was in place, and they were getting along great. Ringo was being allowed to drum. So they were likely very happy with their progress, and not to belabor the point, as happy as they were, they had no idea what was in store for 1963. The new record Mirror had actually already printed that they expected for the Beatles, and this is a quote, fame on a more national scale is likely to come their way early in the new year. So that had to have been exciting news to read. Remember that the Big Freeze was going, as we've talked about a lot before. So that was something to deal with. That resulted in some hectic traffic situations, some broken windshields, a canceled show in Scotland. But maybe surprisingly, it didn't really affect their progress much at all. It's kind of a background, you know. They know they'll be appearing on Thank Your Lucky Stars, and that come February, they'll be touring with Helen Shapiro. And then after that, with Chris Montez and Tommy Earl. In both cases, they're the opening act.
This is Beatles 60.
This was only part of a longer audio podcast. You can find one or two other parts of this episode on our YouTube channel. We post audio to YouTube only in short segments to make them easy to share. If your purpose is to share short segments of our audio podcast, then the YouTube clips can be convenient, but our YouTube channel is just for segments. It's audio, so there's nothing to look at. We're not really interested in producing video content. So, for Beatles60, to tell you the truth, the YouTube channel is really where the action isn't. If you want a continuous listening experience for yourself while washing up or while hiking or while commuting, similar to listening to audiobooks, then we recommend getting our full podcast episodes automatically sent to your phone or your tablet or your PC every month. Use a podcast app. It's easy to find us and subscribe. There's a link in the show notes, or you can always go to Beatles60.group. You see, you navigate down to one of the episode pictures on the front page, and then you tap that, and then there's a description of the episode, and then listen now, and then you tap that, and you can choose any podcast app that works for you. Or you could listen right there if you want to.
This is Beatles 60.
The interval between this podcast and our next podcast will, 60 years ago, have been the exact same interval.
Get the idea? The Beatles will have experienced the exact same number of days, same season. All of you who have been following this real-time chronicle with us already get the pace.
You already understand, right? Same speed. Technically, we'd call this a longitudinal phenomenological historiographic study.
Larry,
Eh?
what's with all the academic jargon?
Well, this is a serious series. The Earth turns at one speed and in one way, am I right? At least in lived experience, last I looked. Now remember, the future is unwritten.
Ultimately, we're talking about human experience. We can't walk in the Beatles' boots if we're jumping around all different billions and billions of years, as nothing could make any sense.
So come on, we gotta repeat that slogan. This is a chronicle.
Beatles60. We ain't jumping around.